All right, all you royal history buffs, ready for another deep dive. Today, we're stepping into the world of Alexander the Great.
A figure whose impact is, well, still felt even centuries later.
Absolutely. And we're focusing in on his impact on European politics and culture. We've got a whole stack of sources, historical accounts, you name it.
We're going to trace his rise to power.
And all those unexpected consequences that followed. So get ready for some serious royal drama.
Because this one's for the history books.
It really is. What's always captivated you about Alexander?
You know, for me, it's how he mixed military power with, cultural influence. He wasn't just conquering, he wanted to actually reshape the world.
And reshape he did.
He really did.
Let's start with the scene that really kicked off his meteoric rise.
Okay.
The death of Darius III, the Persian king. We're talking pivotal moment, aftermath of Gaugamela.
Right.
What went down there?
So the stories from those close to Alexander paint this picture of, well, a dying Darius naming Alexander as his heir. Convenient, right.
Yep.
Probably helped legitimize Alexander's claim to the Persian throne. But when you dig into the sources a bit,
Yeah.
there are these hints of, political maneuvering, maybe some historical spin.
So a bit of royal propaganda mixed in with genuine ambition.
Absolutely.
Classic.
And Alexander, he was a master at using these kinds of stories to his advantage.
That's true.
He even started calling Darius his foster brother. Gained the support of Darius's mother. It's classic power play, being seen as an avenger, not a conqueror.
And it seems to have worked, at least at first.
Yeah.
He quickly takes control of key Persian cities, adding Babylon, Susa, Persepolis to his
Growing empire.
growing empire, yeah.
Yeah.
But the fall of Persepolis shows us a different side of Alexander. Allowing that city to be plundered and burned, that magnificent palace of Xerxes a sign.
Yeah.
It raises questions about his motives.
It does.
Was it like calculated intimidation?
Yeah.
Or just pure fury?
Yeah. It's a reminder that even these big figures in history have their complexities.
Yeah.
And Alexander's story, it just gets more interesting as he gets deeper into Persian culture.
Oh, yeah.
Like when he starts adopting those customs, the elaborate ritual of proskynesis.
Right. Prostration before the king.
Yeah. Now imagine you're a Macedonian soldier, used to a certain level of equality with your king.
Right.
Suddenly you're expected to bow, kiss his feet, maybe even fully prostrate yourself. This clash of cultures, real tension in Alexander's ranks.
Makes sense. A lot of them probably saw it as like sacrilege, right? A form of worship for the gods.
Exactly.
Talk about a recipe for conflict.
Yeah.
And that conflict, it really boils over in the story of Clytus,
Oh, yeah.
the guy who once saved Alexander's life in battle.
During a drunken feast, Clytus criticizes Alexander, right, about adopting these Persian customs. Alexander, also fueled by wine, he reacts, kills his friend, his loyal general.
Wow.
It's just tragic. You really see that tension between Alexander's ambition and his Macedonian roots.
Absolutely. A huge turning point. This incident, along with Alexander's growing paranoia, it leads to a bunch of events that truly test his leadership. He's seeing enemies everywhere.
Oh, everywhere, even among those closest to him.
Exactly. And one of the biggest examples is that alleged conspiracy with Philotas,
Son of Parmenion, Alexander's second in command.
accused of plotting against the king. Both Philotas and Parmenion executed. It makes you wonder, were those accusations real? Or was it just Alexander eliminating rivals?
Well, that's where things get a little murky. Some accounts paint Alexander as suspicious, ruthless, silencing any perceived threat. Others argue he was just trying to keep order in this vast empire.
So we've got this ruler grappling with immense power, facing challenges from both inside and out. And this is when he sets his sights east, on India.
Driven by what seems like just insatiable ambition, he's on a campaign to conquer the whole subcontinent.
But even for Alexander, there are limits.
Right.
His troops are exhausted, they've been at war for years, and they finally reach their breaking point at the Ganges River.
Yeah, a real turning point. Even with his charisma, his leadership, Alexander has to acknowledge the cost of his pursuits. He gives up his dream of conquering India and starts the long journey back west.
So this seemingly invincible Alexander returns to Babylon.
Which he declares as the capital of his massive empire.
It's a moment of reflection, right? To look over all those territories he now controls.
Absolutely.
We're talking about an empire spanning 3 continents.
Europe, Asia, Africa. Remarkable for a man who started as a young king in Macedonia.
It really speaks to his strategic brilliance.
Adapting to different terrains, enemies, understanding how warfare works on a psychological level.
Yeah,
He kept his opponents guessing.
it's true. He used misinformation, cunning tactics to get those victories.
Always thinking outside the box.
For sure. Look at the Battle of Gaugamela, spreading rumors of a night attack. Classic.
Classic Alexander.
It's no wonder he's often compared to Sun Tzu.
Both emphasize deception, discipline, knowing your enemy.
Right. But even with all those successes, his story takes a sudden turn. At 32, in Babylon, he gets sick and dies.
Mysterious circumstances.
A dramatic end to a life full of drama. Was it natural causes? Poison? Who knows? Sources contradict each other. His death, a real historical enigma.
And with no heir, it throws the empire into chaos.
Wow.
The beginning of a whole new chapter, a power struggle that'll reshape the ancient world, and it gives rise to the Hellenistic era. And with this sudden death, no designated heir, it's like a power vacuum.
Right.
And his generals, the Diadochi, they're all vying for control.
It's like a real-life Game of Thrones, right?
Exactly. Alliances shifting, betrayals.
It's amazing how quickly things fall apart without someone like Alexander at the top.
He really does say a lot about the ambition around him.
For sure.
And from all this chaos, we see 4 major kingdoms emerge.
Okay.
The Antigonids in Greece, the Ptolemies in Egypt,
Yeah.
the Seleucids controlling most of that former Persian Empire, and then the Attalids in Asia Minor.
So Alexander's empire breaks apart, but his influence, it doesn't just disappear.
Right, morphs, takes on new forms as these Hellenistic kingdoms spread Greek culture and ideas.
It's like a dandelion spreading its seeds.
That's a great analogy.
Alexander's conquests planted the seeds, and then his successors, with their own ambitions, they scattered them.
Yeah, far and wide.
But what did this Hellenistic culture actually look like? Was it just a copy of classical Greece?
Not exactly. It was more of a fusion, Greek traditions mixing with the existing customs and beliefs.
So like a marketplace where Greek philosophers are debating with Persian scholars?
Exactly.
Or maybe a theater where you see Greek tragedy, but with Egyptian music.
That kind of vibrant mix, creating something new.
So cool. What were some of the key elements that define this Hellenistic culture?
Well, the founding of cities was huge.
Okay.
Alexander and his successors, they established so many cities, many named Alexandria.
Right.
They were strategically placed along trade routes, meant to be centers of learning and commerce.
So they weren't just military outposts.
Right. They were beacons of Hellenistic culture.
It's interesting how they used urban planning as a tool.
It really is.
Did these cities actually resemble the Greek city-states?
They had some shared features like the agora, that central marketplace, and the gymnasium.
Right.
But they also blended in local architecture and urban design.
Creating that unique blend.
Yeah, and think about the Library of Alexandria in Egypt with all those scrolls, that commitment to knowledge.
It's like a symbol of this Hellenistic fusion.
Exactly.
Speaking of knowledge, how did this cultural exchange impact art, literature, and philosophy?
Oh, it was huge.
Like, were there any major changes?
For sure. The Hellenistic period was a flourishing of creativity.
Because of those different cultural viewpoints?
Exactly. In art, you start to see a move away from those idealized forms of classical Greek sculpture.
Okay.
It becomes more realistic and emotional.
Interesting.
They depicted everyday people with all their imperfections, themes of drama, movement, emotion.
It's like those artistic shifts reflect a changing world.
Exactly.
What about literature?
Well, Hellenistic literature often reflects this uncertainty
Okay.
and longing for meaning in a world that felt more fragmented.
Yeah.
We see new genres emerge, like pastoral poetry, idealizing a simple life,
Right.
and then philosophical works grappling with questions of ethics and happiness.
So a shift from grand narratives to a more personal, introspective focus
You got it.
and philosophy, any new schools of thought,
Definitely. This era sees Stoicism and Epicureanism come about.
which were all about, what, living a good life in a challenging world.
Exactly. Stoicism emphasized virtue, self-control, living in harmony with nature.
Okay.
Epicureanism taught that pleasure and avoiding pain were the goals.
Interesting.
Both became super popular.
And they influenced later Roman thought, even modern perspectives.
It's amazing how these ideas still resonate with us.
It really is. But this era wasn't just about philosophy and art, right?
Right.
What about the politics? Were these Hellenistic kingdoms constantly at war?
There were definitely power struggles.
I can imagine.
The Diadochi and their successors always fighting for territory.
Yeah.
But even with those rivalries, there was this sense of shared Hellenistic identity.
That went beyond politics.
Exactly. They saw themselves as part of this larger cultural world. shaped by Greek language and traditions.
Like competing siblings,
That's a good way to put it.
trying to outdo each other, but still acknowledging their shared heritage.
Right.
Did that shared identity lead to any unity or cooperation?
Oh, there were definitely times of cooperation, especially in trade and cultural exchange.
Makes sense.
Greek became the common language of the Hellenistic world.
Facilitating everything.
Exactly. Scholars and artists traveled between kingdoms, sharing ideas.
It's like this web of interactions
Yeah.
with conflict and collaboration.
Exactly.
But didn't this spread of Greek culture have a negative side? Did it suppress local traditions?
It's true that the spread wasn't always peaceful or equitable.
Right.
There was resistance, and some local traditions were marginalized. But remember, cultural exchange is rarely one-sided.
Good point.
Hellenistic culture itself changed because of its contact with the East,
Oh, interesting.
bringing in elements of Persian, Egyptian, and other traditions.
So it's a really complex process with both winners and losers.
Exactly.
What about the average person living in this Hellenistic world? How did these changes impact them?
For many, it brought more opportunities for trade, travel, education.
Okay.
Cities were thriving, new technologies emerged.
Sounds pretty good.
But that prosperity wasn't evenly spread.
Right.
Slavery was still common, and a lot of people, especially in rural areas, lived in poverty.
So a world of contrasts with progress and inequality.
Yes.
How did this Hellenistic period end? Did these kingdoms just fade away?
They did gradually weaken from internal strife and external pressures.
What kind of pressures?
Well, the rise of Rome was a big one. The Roman Republic.
Yeah.
One by one, the Hellenistic kingdoms were conquered by the Romans.
Marking the end of an era. So Rome just absorbs this Hellenistic world. Does that mean Greek culture disappears?
Not at all.
Really?
Roman culture was heavily influenced by Greek art, literature, philosophy. In many ways, Rome became the heir to the Hellenistic legacy, preserving and passing it on.
So even though the kingdoms were gone, their impact lived on.
Exactly, and that's what makes studying history so fascinating.
Yeah.
We can trace these connections across time, see how things change and transform.
It's like we're unraveling this giant tapestry,
That's a great way to put it.
each thread representing a different event, person, idea,
And you step back and you see this intricate pattern.
connecting us to the past.
Exactly.
So we've seen the rise and fall of Alexander's empire, how his successors carved out their own kingdoms. But let's zoom in on how these Hellenistic kingdoms actually shaped European politics and culture.
Right, they're lasting legacies.
Exactly. Like for all our royal history fans out there, what are we talking about here? What kind of echoes are we seeing even today?
Well, it's really interesting to see how these different dynasties approached their roles.
Yeah.
Take the Antigonids, for instance.
Good.
They really saw themselves as the guardians of classical Greek heritage. Ruling over mainland Greece, they were big on promoting Greek culture, sponsoring festivals, building theaters, supporting philosophers, artists, you name it.
So they were kind of keeping the flame of ancient Greece alive amidst all the chaos.
Yeah, exactly. They weren't just focused on territory or military power. They got the power of culture, and they worked to preserve and spread those Greek traditions. And that had a big impact, especially on the later Roman Empire.
Which, of course, drew heavily from that Greek culture.
Exactly.
It's amazing how these threads connect across centuries. What about the other Hellenistic kingdoms? Did they have a similar impact on European politics?
Well, let's take the Ptolemies in Egypt. They did things a bit differently. They embraced Egyptian culture while also bringing in Greek administrative and military practices. Their capital, Alexandria, became this truly cosmopolitan hub, attracting scholars, scientists, artists, everyone.
Alexandria.
Yeah.
I can just imagine it, this bustling port city,
Oh, yeah.
a true melting pot. But did their reign really have a direct influence on European politics?
Maybe not as directly as the Antigonids, but their support of the arts and sciences that had ripple effects that went way beyond Egypt. Think of Euclid, for example.
Okay.
The father of geometry, right?
Right.
He lived and worked in Alexandria. His mathematical discoveries still shape how we understand the world today.
It's incredible how these ancient kingdoms still impact us, even in fields like math. And we can't forget about the Seleucid Empire. They had a huge territory, including parts of Asia Minor, which we consider part of Europe today.
Right.
So how did they shape things politically?
The Seleucids had a unique challenge. Their empire was so diverse.
Yeah, makes sense.
All those cultures and languages. So they took a more decentralized approach, let local rulers have some autonomy.
Oh, okay.
But they strategically promoted Hellenistic culture in those big urban centers.
So they were more like facilitators of cultural exchange, not enforcers of Greek traditions.
Exactly. And under their rule, you see new cities popping up, like Antioch, important centers for trade and learning. And this mix of Greek and Eastern influences was really important. It contributed to new philosophical schools and religious movements, some of which would later even influence early Christianity.
Wow, it's so fascinating to see how all these pieces connect, how political decisions and cultural exchange can have these big, lasting consequences.
Yeah, it really is. And although these Hellenistic kingdoms ultimately fall to Rome, their influence on European politics and culture was huge. They were crucial in spreading Greek ideas, artistic achievements, philosophical thought. It's like they set the stage for the Roman Empire.
Which then shaped the whole trajectory of Western civilization.
Exactly.
It's a pretty amazing legacy, a testament to cultural transmission, even in the midst of political turmoil.
It really makes you think, what would our understanding of history be like without these kingdoms?
It's a great question. But one thing's for sure, the world would be drastically different.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Alexander the Great and his successors. We've seen those conquests, cultural shifts, the enduring legacies of these figures. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. I encourage everyone to keep exploring this period.
Oh, yeah.
Dig deeper into these rulers' lives, the complexities of the Hellenistic era.
Because their influence is still felt today.
Absolutely.
And on that note, keep those history books open and stay curious, everyone.